There's a version of you that everyone found easy to be around. You said yes before they finished asking. You apologized for things that were not your fault. You absorbed the mood of every room you walked into, and you told yourself that this was just being considerate. Then one day you stopped. Maybe it was something small. You declined a favor you always used to grant. You let a silence sit instead of rushing to fill it. And you watched something move across the face of the person in front of you. Not sadness, not respect, something closer to alarm. They had built a quiet map of who you were, and you had just walked off the edge of it. That flicker is what this video is about. The moment people realize you're no longer weak is almost never the clean triumph you pictured. It is stranger than that, and Friedrich Nietzsche understood exactly why. If this is already landing, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. Nietzsche spent much of his life circling one uncomfortable idea. He argued that a great deal of what we call morality was invented by people who felt powerless as a way of surviving their own powerlessness. In his book on the genealogy of morals, he gave this feeling a name, ressentiment. It describes what happens when a person cannot act against the thing that wounds them, so they turn the wound inward and build an entire value system out of it. Weakness gets renamed as patience. Fear of conflict gets renamed as kindness. The inability to leave gets renamed as loyalty. His point was not that patience or kindness are fake. His point was sharper than that. We tend to praise these traits most loudly in the exact people we benefit from keeping small. That is the hidden machinery underneath the moment we are talking about. When you were the accommodating one, the people around you were not only enjoying your company. Many of them were enjoying an arrangement, one where your needs stayed quieter than theirs. Your softness was not merely tolerated. In a real sense, it was useful to them. So the day you stop supplying it, you are not breaking a friendship. You are breaking a contract that was never spoken aloud, one that other people signed on your behalf and never showed you. The first thing you notice is not applause. It is irritation. You half expected that standing up for yourself might earn some grudging respect, and instead the early reaction from most people is annoyance, and it arrives quickly. You said no, calmly, without drama, and somehow you're the one being treated as difficult. This is not random. For a long time your yes was automatic, and automatic things go invisible. Nobody thanks a door for opening. They only notice it when it sticks. The instant you develop a self that occasionally pushes back, you stop being furniture and start being a person, and that is genuinely inconvenient for anyone who organized their life around your compliance. The irritation does not mean you did something wrong. It means the old machine is grinding against a new part. And notice this, the complaint is rarely about the specific thing you refused. It is about the fact that refusal is suddenly on the table at all. Then comes the sentence. You've changed. It gets delivered like a diagnosis, sometimes gently, sometimes with an edge, but the meaning underneath stays the same. You used to be easier. Pay attention to how your strength gets renamed in these conversations. The same boundary a confident person would call self-respect gets called cold. Saying no becomes selfish. Asking for the consideration you always gave others becomes high maintenance. This is slave morality working in front of you in real time, exactly as Nietzsche described it. He argued that the powerless do not simply envy strength. They morally condemn it. They construct a vocabulary in which the qualities they lack become sins and the qualities they happen to possess become virtues. So your new spine gets translated into a character defect. Here is the part that catches decent people. Because you are decent, the accusation lands. You start to wonder whether you really have turned cold when all you actually did was stop abandoning yourself. The word change is doing a job. It is asking you to feel guilty for no longer being convenient. There's a quieter move that comes next, and it is easy to miss. They try to provoke you to draw out the reaction that used to be so easy to get. A sharp comment, a familiar dig, the kind of remark that once would have sent you spiraling into apology or defense. They're not always doing it to be cruel. They're doing it because your reactions used to be a lever, and a lever that no longer moves is unsettling to the hand that relied on it. Nietzsche made a strange observation about strength. He said the contempt of a strong person does not poison the way the hatred of a weak person does, because the strong simply have less need to keep score. When you stop taking the bait, you are not winning the exchange. You are declining to enter it. And nothing unsettles a person who fed on your reactivity more than calm. Your old anger gave them something to push against. Your indifference gives them nothing. Some of them would almost prefer your fury, because fury at least meant they still had a handle on you. The absence of that handle tells them, more plainly than any speech you could give, that the old you is genuinely gone. The next thing is harder to say out loud. Often the people who resent your strength most are the ones who once helped you most. It feels backwards, and it stings because some of what they gave you is real, and you know it. But look closely at what a portion of that help actually was. Nietzsche was deeply suspicious of pity. He saw that pity can be a way of caring for someone that also quietly keeps them beneath you. When you were struggling, certain people did not only want to lift you up, they want to stay the one doing the lifting. Your need gave them a role. It gave them a steady, reassuring reason to feel tall. The affection may have been genuine, and at the same time, it was braided together with a dynamic that depended on you staying down. So when you finally rise under your own power, you're not just gaining independence. You are quietly eliminating a position someone held without realizing they had applied for it. Watch who lights up at your strength and who seems oddly deflated by it. The deflation is information. It tells you what part of the bond was load-bearing. If this video is giving you something to think about, subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps us keep making content like this. Once the irritation cools, they test you. Not always on purpose, and rarely with any awareness that they are doing it, but the pattern is consistent. After you hold a boundary, someone will come back a few days later and push on the same spot, a little softer this time, framed as a small thing, just this once. What they are checking underneath the words is whether the new you is permanent or whether it was a mood that will pass if they wait it out. People are creatures of pattern, and your old compliance was a deep one. Part of them genuinely believes that if they apply the familiar pressure, the familiar result will return. Nietzsche wrote about willpower as something closer to a sustained direction than a single dramatic act. He understood that becoming a different person is not one decision, but the same decision made again and again until it stops requiring effort. So the test is not really an insult. Is the world confirming what your strength is made of? Each time you hold, the old expectation loses a little more of its grip until eventually people stop pushing because the door no longer gives. Watch what happens to your explanations. The accommodating version of you explained everything. Every no came wrapped in 3 reasons. Every boundary arrived with an apology stapled to the front because you needed the other person to agree that your limit was reasonable before you felt allowed to keep it. Strength shows up as the slow withdrawal of that justification. You say no, and you stop there. You let the sentence end. Nietzsche admired the capacity to stay silent, the way a drawn bow holds its tension without releasing. He understood that the urge to over-explain is often the urge to be forgiven for existing on your own terms. When you stop explaining, people who were used to bargaining with your guilt suddenly have nothing to bargain with. Some will read the silence as arrogance. It is not. It is the plain fact that you no longer need their permission to make your own choices. That shift, more than any single boundary, is the one that tells them the ground has moved for good. Then there is the thing that costs you something. Some people will leave, and the way they leave will tell you what the relationship actually was. Not everyone renegotiates. A few will simply withdraw, slowly enough that you can almost convince yourself you imagined it. The texts thin out. The invitations stop. The warmth that used to be there is suddenly busy, suddenly elsewhere. And the timing is the tell, because it lines up exactly with the moment you stop being useful in the old way. This is where Nietzsche refuses to comfort you, and I am not going to either. A bond that cannot survive you having a self was not a bond. It was a transaction wearing the costume of one. That is a hard thing to look at directly, especially when the person leaving is someone you loved. But the leaving is not the loss it appears to be. The loss happened earlier quietly, back when the relationship required you to stay smaller than you were. You're only now finding out. What feels like abandonment is closer to a receipt. It shows you what you were being valued for all along. Now, the last one, and this is the part most videos like this will not say to you. The hardest resistance to your strength does not come from other people. It comes from you. Because there was something that the weak version of you received, something real, and a part of you misses it. When you were the one who needed help, you were held. When you were fragile, people were gentle with you. Your smallness purchased a particular kind of tenderness, and some quiet corner of you learned to trade on it. Nietzsche saw this with uncomfortable precision. He understood that suffering can become an identity, that a person can grow attached to their own wound because the wound is reliable, because it explains things, because it asks less of them than healing does. There's a strange safety in being the one who cannot, because the one who cannot is never expected to. So on the days when standing in your own strength feels lonely, you will feel a pull to collapse back into the old softness, not because you're fooled, but because the old softness came with comfort attached. This is the test that has no audience. Nobody else can see it. You will be tempted to become weak again on purpose, just to feel that warmth come back, just to be handled gently one more time. Knowing that the pull exists is most of what it takes to not obey it. So what do you do with all of this? Not the version where you harden into someone who needs no one and trusts nothing. Nietzsche was not arguing for that. And the people who read him that way usually want permission for their own bitterness. His phrase was simpler and stranger. Become who you are. He did not mean invent a self. He meant stop performing the smaller one you were handed, the one that other people found convenient, and let the actual shape of you come forward. The accommodating person you used to be was not the real you that got corrupted. It was a survival strategy that you mistook for a personality. What you're doing now is not getting colder. You're finding out what was underneath the strategy. He had another idea that matters here, and it sounds harsh until you sit with it. The pathos of distance. He believed that becoming a fuller person requires a certain space between you and the pressure to be like everyone else, a willingness to stand slightly apart and not apologize for the gap. This is not contempt for other people. It is the refusal to dissolve into them. When someone tells you that you've changed, the pathos of distance is what lets you hear it without flinching because you're no longer asking that person to be the judge of who you get to be. You can let them have their disappointment. You do not have to fix it. Their reaction is happening on their side of a line you are finally allowed to draw. There's a line of his that has been worn smooth by overuse, and most people quote it wrong. What does not kill me makes me stronger. He did not mean that pain is a gift or that suffering is good for you. He meant something narrower and truer. The struggle that does not destroy you reveals what you are actually built out of. The discomfort of becoming harder to use is exactly that kind of struggle. It is not punishing you. It is showing you the parts of yourself that were always there underneath the accommodation, waiting for a reason to hold. You were never weak in the way you believed. You were occupied. The strength was paying rent on someone else's comfort the entire time. And here is the shift, the one thing to carry out of this. The discomfort you are feeling is not a sign that you made a mistake. It is the sign that the change is real. If standing up for yourself had cost you nothing, it would not have been strength. It would have been another performance. The irritation, the renaming, the baiting, the quiet exits, even the lonely pull back toward your old softness. These are not warnings that you went too far. They are the friction of an actual self moving through a world that had gotten comfortable with your absence. Nietzsche never promised that becoming who you were would feel good. He promised it would feel like yours. The people who realize you're no longer weak will not throw you a celebration. Some will adjust and stay, and those are the ones worth keeping. Some will test you until the old door stops opening. Some will disappear, and they will tell you, by disappearing, what they were actually there for. You do not need to chase any of them, and you do not need to punish them either. You only need to stop being surprised. That was Nietzsche's real answer, underneath all of it. Not revenge, not coldness, not a wall. Just the end of surprise. You stop expecting the world to applaud the moment you become harder to use. You learn to read the irritation and the silence for what they are, which is confirmation, not condemnation. And you keep standing anyway, on a foundation that finally belongs to you and no one else. Thank you for watching. More videos are on your screen now, and if you haven't already, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.